Welcome to Preservation Oaks, the podcast where we invite you to step away from the bustle of everyday life. Settle in and relax, and take a moment to leave the familiar behind as we explore the hidden gems of America that preserve our cultural past. We call them our Preservation Oaks, and with each episode, we'll journey to a different corner of the country, where we'll discover the unique histories, landscapes, and communities that make up our nation. We'll visit with local museums, historical, and genealogical societies. They are the stewards of these stories. They preserve the legacy of each place like precious pieces of fabric in a quilt that binds the freedom-loving, hard-working people in this country together. So, slow down, grab a beverage, open your mind, and let us take you on a tour of the fascinating histories and heartfelt traditions that lie just beyond the horizon. This is Preservation Oaks, where every story is a stitch in the fabric of our shared culture. Now, join our host, Sean Radcliff, as he uncovers another thread in the tapestry of America's heritage and what it takes to preserve it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Preservation Oaks. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got a fascinating and culturally rich program lined up for you. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about the ongoing war in Ukraine, an event that has captured the world's attention since the Russian invasion in 2022. This unprovoked act of aggression has drawn widespread international condemnation, with 141 countries standing together in a United Nations vote to demand Russia's immediate withdrawal. But the roots of this conflict run deeper than recent headlines. The story begins in 2014 with Russia's unlawful annexation of Crimea and the ensuing turmoil in eastern Ukraine. Fast forward to 2022 when Russia launched a full-scale invasion, turning this conflict into one of the largest humanitarian crises in modern Europe. It's a devastating chapter in history, but it's far from the first time Ukraine has faced upheaval. Today we'll explore not just the current conflict, but the rich, complex history that has shaped Ukraine into the nation it is today. In order to do justice to our guest organization today, we're kicking things off with a quick crash course on Ukrainian history and culture. After that, we'll welcome our special guest, Ms. Olga Liskiwskyi, Executive Director of the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum in Hamtramck, Michigan, to educate us about the Ukrainian community in Michigan and the work of the UAAM. The Ukrainian American Archives and Museum, or UAAM, is a vibrant hub dedicated to preserving Ukrainian history and heritage. Through its archives, folk art, fine art, library, and engaging programs like lectures, exhibits, and workshops, the museum connects generations and highlights the incredible contributions of Ukrainian Americans to Michigan and the United States. By the end of this episode, I think you'll find yourself as inspired as I am by their mission to celebrate and protect this rich cultural legacy. But before we dive in, a quick shout out. Preservation Oaks is available on nearly every podcast platform, as well as Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, and more. Wherever you're listening, please like, comment, follow, or subscribe. It helps us grow and continue shining a spotlight on these incredible organizations. And to all our listeners who've been spreading the word about the program, thank you. You're the reason we can share these stories and celebrate the unsung heroes of history. And you can reach us at preservationoaks@gmail.com. All right, let's talk about the next episode of Preservation Oaks for a second. We'll be hanging out with the awesome folks at the Plymouth Historical Society and their very own Mike Wolozik. These history champs have been rocking it since 1948, powered by the generosity of people who totally get how cool Plymouth's history is. Their mission? To dig into the past, collect all the fascinating stories and artifacts tied to Plymouth, Michigan, and keep it all alive for future generations. Seriously, how cool is that? Don't miss it. This episode is going to be epic. Now, let's get cozy, grab a cup of tea, and dive into the fascinating history of Ukraine from ancient times to today. And then afterward, we'll meet Ms. Olga Liskiwskyi to learn more about the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum and its incredible work. That all being said, let's get this show snapping. So let's begin with a brief overview of Ukrainian history. Ukrainian history is rich and complex, with the territory of modern-day Ukraine having been inhabited for thousands of years. It's marked by numerous invasions, foreign rule, and significant events. Ukraine's history dates back to the 3rd millennium BCE, when the Tripelia culture thrived in the region. Later, it was inhabited by various tribes, including the Scythians and Sarmatians. The medieval state of Kievan Rus, from the 9th to the 13th centuries, marked the beginning of Ukrainian history as we know it today. This federation of Slavic and Finno-Ugric tribes was centered around Kiev and reached its peak during the reign of Volodymyr the Great and his successor, Yaroslav the Wise. In the 13th century, the Mongol invasion led to the decline of Kievan Rus. The territories of present-day Ukraine were later divided between the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Kingdom of Poland, and the Principality of Moldavia. In the 16th century, Ukrainian Cossacks emerged as the military and political force. This was in response to the fact that the majority of Ukrainians were in serfdom. Many people at the time, in an attempt to escape serfdom, established the Zaporozhian Host, which aimed to protect their lands from invaders. Ukraine was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth for several centuries until the Commonwealth was partitioned by neighboring countries in the late 18th century. Following the partitions of Poland, Ukrainian territories were divided between the Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The struggle for Ukrainian independence continued throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. Ukrainian independence was announced and established in 1918. Ukraine was incorporated into the Soviet Union in 1922 as the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. During this time, Ukraine faced severe political repression, forced collectivization, and famine. Notably, the Holodomor in 1932 and 1933, which was the result of the fact that Ukrainian peasants were not willing to go into collective farms under Soviet rule. During World War II, Ukraine was occupied by Nazi Germany and suffered massive destruction and loss of life. There were forced removals by the Nazis of any young people over 18 years of age, and they were moved to forced labor camps in the Reich. After the war, Ukraine remained part of the Soviet Union until it gained independence on August 24, 1991, following the collapse of the Soviet Union. After independence came the Orange Revolution in 2004 and 2005. This was a major political movement sparked by widespread electoral fraud in the presidential elections. The protests led to a rerun of the election, and the pro-Western candidate Viktor Yushchenko emerged as the victor. This revolution helped shape Ukraine's political direction toward closer ties with the West. In late 2013 and early 2014, mass protests erupted in Ukraine after then-President Viktor Yanukovych abandoned an agreement to associate with the European Union, opting for closer ties with Russia instead. This led to the Euromaidan and the 2014 Revolution of Dignity, which resulted in Yanukovych's ouster in February 2014. In response to the political upheaval in Ukraine, Russia moved to annex Crimea in March 2014. This was condemned by Ukraine and much of the international community who consider Crimea to be a part of Ukraine. The annexation escalated tensions between Russia and Ukraine and contributed to the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine, where Russia has been involved in supporting separatists. And the rest of Ukraine's history we've all been living through since. Following Crimea's annexation, pro-Russian separatists in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions declared independence from Ukraine, leading to a prolonged conflict in eastern Ukraine that has continued for years, with Russia's involvement playing a significant role. Now, let's discuss the Ukrainian culture. Well, it's deeply rooted in tradition and has been shaped by its tumultuous history and diverse influences. The Ukrainian language is an East Slavic language related to at least 10 other Slavic languages in the region. It is the official language of Ukraine and is spoken by a majority of its population. The majority of Ukrainians practice Eastern Orthodox Christianity, with a significant minority adhering to the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, which follows the Eastern Orthodox liturgy but is in communion with the Roman Catholic Church. There are also large Muslim and Jewish communities in Ukraine. Ukrainian folklore, including traditional songs, dances, and costumes, plays an important role in the country's cultural heritage. The national dress, called the vyshyvanka, is adorned with intricate embroidery patterns. Ukrainian cuisine is hearty and diverse, with dishes like borscht, a beet soup, vareniki, which are dumplings filled with potatoes or cottage cheese, and halupsti, stuffed cabbage rolls, being popular staples. Recently, UNESCO named Ukrainian borscht a cultural treasure through the efforts of a Ukrainian chef named Eugene Kolopotenko. Ukraine has a rich literary tradition with notable writers like Taras Shevchenko, Lesya Ukrainka, and Ivan Franko. Ukrainian art, particularly painting and decorative arts, is characterized by its vibrant colors and intricate patterns. In the 1920s and 30s, Ukraine was a part of the modernist movement in literature and art, and this was suppressed during Soviet rule. Writers and artists were repressed, exiled, or exterminated. Ukraine has a strong tradition of folk music and dance, with ensembles like the Versky National Folk Dance Company showcasing the country's vibrant choreography and musicianship. And now, finally, let's discuss an overview of Ukrainian immigration to the United States. Ukrainian immigration to the United States has a significant history, which can be divided into several distinct waves. The first wave of Ukrainian immigrants arrived in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, so late 1800s and early 1900s. This wave was driven primarily by economic factors as Ukrainians sought better job opportunities in the growing industrial sector of the United States. Most of these immigrants settled in large industrial cities such as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, and Cleveland, Ohio, where they worked in automotive, steel mills, coal mines, and other heavy industries. The second wave of Ukrainian immigration followed World War I and the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This wave was from 1919 to 1924. Many Ukrainians, now refugees, sought to escape the political instability and economic hardships of the post-war period. The United States, with its booming economy and need for workers, was an attractive destination. This wave was cut short by the restrictive immigration quotas imposed by the Immigration Act of 1924. The third wave was from 1947 to 1951 and came after World War II. Many Ukrainians were displaced by the conflict and found themselves refugees in displaced person camps in Germany and Austria. The United States, as part of its efforts to resettle European refugees, opened its doors to these Ukrainians under the Displaced Persons Act of 1948. This wave of immigration primarily consisted of intellectuals, artists, and professionals who made significant contributions to the Ukrainian American community and to the broader American society. And in 1958, is when the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum was started. Now the fourth wave was from 1975 to 1991. It began in the mid-1970s as the Soviet government relaxed its immigration restrictions. This wave was characterized by a significant number of Ukrainian Jews who immigrated from the Soviet Union. Many of these immigrants were highly educated professionals who sought religious freedom and better economic opportunities in the United States. And finally, the fifth wave, which is still ongoing at this time and started in 1991. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukrainians gained the right to freely emigrate, and a new wave of immigration began. This wave has been driven by various factors, including economic opportunities, family reunification, the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The Ukrainian American community continues to grow and maintain its strong cultural identity in the United States. Throughout these waves of immigration, Ukrainian Americans have made significant contributions to American society in various fields, including science, arts, sports, and politics. Today, the United States is home to one of the largest Ukrainian diasporas in the world, with an estimated population of over 1 million people of Ukrainian descent. By the way, a diaspora refers to a group of people who have spread or been dispersed from their original homeland to other countries or regions, often due to factors like migration, exile, or displacement. The term is most commonly used to describe communities of people who maintain cultural, ethnic, and national ties to their country of origin, even while living outside of it. Nationwide, there are between 1.5 to 2 million Americans of Ukrainian descent. Michigan is home to one of the largest Ukrainian diasporas in the United States, with an estimated 60,000 to 70,000 Ukrainian Americans living in the state. This makes Michigan the third largest Ukrainian community in the country after New York and Pennsylvania. The Detroit metropolitan area, including cities like Hamtramck, Dearborn, and Detroit itself, is the heart of Michigan's Ukrainian community. Hamtramck, in particular, has historically been a hub for Ukrainian immigrants, and it continues to have a significant Ukrainian American population today. The population has subsequently migrated northward into Warren, Troy, and Sterling Heights, Michigan. Hamtramck is home to the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum, or UAAM, as well as a number of Ukrainian Orthodox and Catholic churches and cultural institutions that preserve Ukrainian heritage. The Ukrainian American community in Michigan is active in preserving and celebrating its heritage through festivals, cultural events, Ukrainian language schools, and religious observances. Michigan is also home to several Ukrainian Orthodox and Ukrainian Catholic churches, cultural centers, and Ukrainian American organizations that serve as important cultural and social hubs for the community. Ukrainian Americans in Michigan have contributed to various sectors, including labor, business, politics, and arts. The community has maintained strong connections to Ukraine, with many still sending remittances and offering support in times of need, such as during the ongoing war in Ukraine. Mary Beck was the Detroit Council from 1949 to the late 1960s, and in the 1950s, she was the acting mayor of Detroit when Mayor Cobo was ill. Her parents arrived in the U.S. in the early 20th century. They settled in Pennsylvania and then migrated to Detroit. Mary left her archive of information to the UAAM. Michigan's Ukrainian community has a long and rich history, and it continues to thrive and support both its heritage and its connection to Ukraine, especially during pivotal moments in the homeland's history. And now that you have all that important background and information, here's a short biography of today's guest. Olga Liskiwskyi serves as the executive director of the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum in Hamtramck, Michigan, where she has led the institution since April 2018. Born in Detroit to Ukrainian immigrants who arrived in the United States in 1949 after fleeing post-World War II Europe, Olga grew up deeply immersed in Ukrainian culture. Her parents, both survivors of displaced persons camps in Germany, instilled in her a profound connection to her heritage and a commitment to preserving it. Olga's dedication to cultural preservation began early, attending Ukrainian language schools on Saturdays and participating in Ukrainian institutes at Harvard University during the summers. She later served as the editor-in-chief of Our Life, a monthly magazine published by the Ukrainian National Women's League of America. Her leadership extended to serving as treasurer for the Ukrainian Children's Aid and Relief Effort, or UCARE Incorporated, coordinating humanitarian and arts initiatives in Ukraine, and as parish council president at St. Mary, the Protectress Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Southfield, Michigan. Professionally, Olga brought her museum and collections management expertise to UAAM, transitioning it from a small house museum into a prominent cultural institution. Under her leadership, UAAM has forged collaborations with the Hamtramck Arts Commission, Wayne State University, and the University of Michigan, among others. The museum now hosts conferences, workshops, and exhibitions highlighting Ukrainian history, art, and contributions to American society. Olga has also worked on notable projects at the Henry Ford Museum and the Motown Historical Museum, showcasing her extensive experience in museum operations. In response to the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Olga volunteered with the Ukrainian American Crisis Committee in Michigan, focusing on safeguarding Ukrainian cultural artifacts amid the conflict. Her ongoing efforts to preserve Ukrainian heritage locally and internationally underscore her vital role in connecting past and present generations. Through her work, Olga continues to champion the rich tapestry of Ukrainian culture, ensuring its preservation and celebration with the Detroit metropolitan area and beyond. All right. Welcome to the program, Olga.
Thanks for having me today, Sean.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
I'd like to start with your first question to us.
Okay. What compelling narratives from Hamtramck's history encapsulate Ukrainian spirit and heritage?
Well, it's interesting to note that Hamtramck is a small city, roughly 2 miles around, surrounded by Detroit. Throughout its history, it's attracted many different immigrations, such as the French, Germans, Polish, Ukrainians, Albanians, Bengali, and the Yemeni. This small enclave was where many immigrants began their lives in America. The Ukrainians, much like others, left their homelands fleeing wars, unrest, oppression, or seeking better economic opportunities. The earliest group of immigrants found themselves living actually in southwest Detroit and gathered as a community to establish the first Ukrainian Byzantine Rite parish in 1907. This was St. John the Baptist Ukrainian Catholic Church, which is still in existence and thriving to this day. By 1910, the Dodge brothers expanded their motor car assembly to a new facility in Hamtramck. Many Ukrainian immigrants sought jobs here and began to move to the area to be closer to work. In response to this, the clergy and faithful of St. John's saw the wisdom of purchasing property in Hamtramck on a street called Grayling. By 1913, construction began with the first liturgy in the new church building celebrated on Palm Sunday in 1914. The two parish communities maintained a close relationship with priests serving both church communities. Soon, lots were being purchased on Grayling by Ukrainians who built homes, established shops, and businesses. In fact, in 1917, the community contracted the building of a Ukrainian national home, known in Ukrainian as Nasha Chata, which means our home. This facility became a community center with banquet, stage, and school facilities. In fact, we were recently loaned a group photo from 1928 showing the pupils, teachers, and their families in front of the Ukrainian language school in Hamtramck.
Olga, as a center dedicated to telling the story of the Ukrainian American experience in Michigan, what unique stories or themes have emerged from your archives that you believe are vital for people to understand?
Well, thanks for asking. Throughout the various waves or influxes of immigrants or refugees from Ukraine, what is notable is that they were seeking opportunities to safeguard themselves and their families. Although respecting their new home as being the country that welcomed them, they never lost sight of their home country and the lands they came from. It's interesting that Ukrainians throughout the U.S. joined a fraternal benefit society called the Ukrainian National Association, with its origins in the coal mines of Pennsylvania back in 1894. This group operated solely for the benefit of its members, with profits used to fund member and community projects. This was organized around a lodge or branch system and offered members a way to benefit themselves and others in their community. The phrase often heard at that time was brother helping brother, because they really couldn't get any help from outside their own community. So this was used to describe their initiative. In fact, we have an anniversary book published in 1936 in our library which documents the history of all the branches in the U.S. through the mid-1930s. What was notable in their reports was that each branch collected funds for the organization, but also looked for ways to support projects in their original homeland of Ukraine.
Oh, very interesting. I've heard this before when I've interviewed other historical societies that have immigrant populations.
Mm-hmm.
They would start these benefit associations to help each other. I
Yeah.
think that's
And
really
it
cool.
actually was something that they started in Ukraine. They started these fraternal organizations to kind of help each other, like their credit union type of situation.
Yeah. Very cool. What date did you say it started?
1894.
Oh, wow. Way early.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you had Ukrainians and Ruthenians coming in to be coal miners in Pennsylvania, and that's kind of their origin story.
Yeah, because they had no benefits back then.
They had no benefits, yeah.
Help each other out. That's very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
That organization, that's not still in existence, is it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, my goodness. Oh,
Yeah, in
my
fact,
goodness.
like my parents signed us up when we were born because they provide insurance benefits.
Wow, that is really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That is a great thing. Huh. I got to ask you, how do the unique traits of Ukrainian culture in Michigan and the connection to the country of Ukraine manifest both difficulties and potentials for preserving its heritage?
Well, it's interesting. Since the initial territorial aggressions against Ukraine, notably, I'm talking about the annexation of eastern lands and the Crimea in 2014, we felt the financial impact here in the U.S. Although, as we are called upon to do more and more to highlight and share Ukrainian history and culture, assistance from the Ukrainian American communities has been diverted to support the efforts of a volunteer military force in Ukraine and now for humanitarian efforts because of the destruction going on in Ukraine since February 2022. The difficulties lie in both funding and staffing at this point. And we're finding that without a secure base of funds, which is the case for many nonprofits, it's difficult to look to the future and expand our work and programs. We're also mindful of wanting to be good stewards of all the artifacts and archives entrusted to us. So that's always an underlining stimulus for us to continue to seek funds.
Oh, yeah. And that country is war-torn. I have no idea whether the entire country is rubble or how it really looks on the ground, but I imagine that their culture is under attack, right?
Well, definitely their culture. And if their museums aren't being destroyed, like for instance, when the Russian soldiers were leaving a city called Kherson in southwest Ukraine, they pulled up large trucks, like cargo-bearing trucks, and just removed the contents of museums.
Oh, gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, that is terrible.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you for doing what you do, believe me.
Thank you.
What captivating lesser-known narratives about your work and mission does your organization emphasize in its work?
Well, we are looking always to highlight the lost stories. It seems that each immigration thinks that history of their community begins with them. Often they know little about those who came before them to the U.S. and their predecessors, or, are not known to them at all. Recently, we have been documenting the contributions of Ukrainian Americans in Michigan. There have been various efforts throughout the years to do this work, but we still find that some of the accomplishments of local activists are being overlooked. We continue to be contacted by museums and libraries in Ukraine interested in the lives of Ukrainians who immigrated to the U.S. It's interesting that many individuals active in Ukrainian identity and independence movements in Ukraine had dossiers kept by the NKVD or KGB, the Secret Service, in the Soviet Ukraine. Recently, we discovered that a notable local Ukrainian American lawyer and political activist dossier was declassified in Ukraine. And from it, we learned that the files were started in 1941 while he was still in Ukraine and closed in 1980, a year after his death. And by then, he had immigrated to the United States like in the late 40s. So they were maintaining a dossier on this man throughout his life. Quite honestly, it was an eye-opener to learn of the extent of the surveillance and interest there was on the side of the communist regime in the Soviet Union regarding the work of Ukrainians in the diaspora. In fact, this pointed to the fact that their memories and grievances against Ukrainian activists was long and unrelenting.
Wow. And today, with our modern technology, just think what they can do.
Well, it's very funny because we were looking for a decent photograph of this lawyer. We wanted to feature him in an exhibit, and I called his daughter-in-law, who's still alive, and asked if she could look through the family's history, the photographs. And she didn't have any really good photographs. And I actually pulled up the dossier that was kept by the KGB, and they had the best photographs.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
So
God.
thank you.
Yeah, there's an upside to it. But there
Yeah.
sure is a downside to it.
Yeah.
Can't imagine what people would do with that information, to track a person throughout their life and on paper at that time, right?
Well, and they were looking for ways to spread disinformation about that individual.
Oh, yeah.
And
Okay.
for instance, this lawyer was one of the representatives of the Ukrainian immigration to some discussions, I think, about human rights that was held in, I believe it was in Iran at the time, and he was part of a delegation. So that was noted in his dossier, and they were looking to discredit him.
Oh, of course. Of course. Boy, they got their fingers into everything, don't they?
Yeah.
My goodness. So, going back, what inspired the founding of the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum in 1958? And how has its mission evolved over the years?
Well, it's interesting because this was a time when you didn't have Google or the internet, and the first initiatives was mainly to create a reading room. So the original director started collecting membership dues and donations to subscribe to various immigrant publications. And wherever Ukrainians were worldwide, wherever they ended up, whether it was France or Australia or South America, there would be publications that would be published in Ukrainian. And so he began to subscribe to a lot of these publications and also other foreign publications, anything that was published in Poland, something that the local Ukrainians might be interested in. And so it was a gathering place. He began to collect books. So he began to maintain a library, and his name was Roman Liskiwskyi. He was the initial founder of what was a reading room. And later on, after they incorporated as a nonprofit in the late 60s, they began to see that they should be collecting. Actually, people were giving them artifacts and items to showcase the Ukrainian culture. So little by little, we began to accumulate various textiles and Ukrainian Easter eggs, which are called pisanki, and artwork. And we began to gather archives from Ukrainian American organizations that were active locally and were looking for someplace to act as a repository for their documents. So that's pretty much how we evolved into the institution where we are now. We were actually in a small house museum, and it was located by a Ukrainian Catholic church here in Hamtramck. And we actually purchased a retail space on one of the main streets in Hamtramck. And we needed a space for our archives and our collections, someplace where we could house them safely. And also, we were looking to expand our library. Actually, right now we have 30,000 books, which we're inventorying. And also, we needed more space for exhibits. We also have a small gallery where we host workshops and smaller exhibits. So it's quite a nice space. It's very roomy. And we also do a number of community events here as well.
Fantastic. I was reading that in the United States, and I think I shared this in the intro, that there's several million Ukrainian Americans, right?
Right.
Is that like the largest concentration of expat Ukrainians outside of Ukraine?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, there's a big community in Australia.
Okay.
Right now with the immigrants in Poland, I think there's a very large refugee community there.
Oh, yeah, I read that.
Yeah, and I would say too, South America, in Brazil, Argentina, they also, have quite a big Ukrainian population.
Okay.
And it's one of the older populations. They began to immigrate to Brazil, I think, the end of the 19th century.
Okay. Very cool.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of it had to do with the immigration policies of the United States. So there were quotas.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Sometimes there were communities, and if somebody had a relative in one of the Brazilian communities, it wasn't usually in the city. A lot of Ukrainians were just in agriculture. They moved to, remote areas and were establishing farms and things like that.
Okay. Well, folks, I'd like to give the contact information of the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum. Their website is www.ukrainianmuseumdetroit.org. And their Facebook is at UAAM Detroit. Their email is uaamdetroit@gmail.com. You can phone them at 313-366-9764. Their address is 9630 Joseph Campau, Hamtramck, Michigan, 48212, and you spell Campau, Campau. The museum hours are Wednesday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sunday to Tuesday, they're closed. That all sound right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Olga, what are some of the ways Ukrainian Americans integrated into American society while preserving their unique cultural heritage?
Well, countless immigrants arriving after World War II to the U.S., a lot of them had been waiting and living in displaced person camps in Western Germany and Austria. These were administered by the Allied forces and later by the United Nations. The camps were divided into administrative zones run by the American forces, British, French, and the Soviets. And so Ukrainians and others lived in these camps anywhere from 1 year to up to 4, waiting for Western countries to admit them. Many of these folks were professionals and accomplished in their fields of medicine, education, engineering, and law. But once in the U.S., they had to become proficient in English and, in most cases, requalify in their fields. They worked hard to establish themselves and their families while continuing to create organizations or join existing Ukrainian American institutions in the Detroit metro area. This group of immigrants also brought with them an interest in establishing organizations that were important to them in Ukraine up through World War II. So you'll see things like the youth scouting organizations called Plast, which was banned in Ukraine under the Soviets, as well as others. And going back to the displaced persons camps, also known as DP camps, in those camps, they formed close relationships with other Ukrainians from different areas of Ukraine. And they established publications, theatrical groups, trade schools, associations, churches while in there. Many had lost family members, either through separation during the war or death. And these camp relationships actually replaced in part these lost familial connections. So you'll see a lot of instances where Ukrainians living in America would have reunions of their close friends that they met and, at the displaced person camps and things like that. So they continued to not so much assimilate into American culture. They took the best of what America had to offer, but they never forgot where they came from.
Yeah. I can't imagine the suffering. Well, first of all, the suffering in World War II was terrible, but
Mm-hmm.
to be in a displaced persons camp, over in Europe, in Germany, and then coming to a place where you know nobody. Well, I mean, there was help because there's other immigrants that are here that are helping them, but that only goes so far.
Yeah, it was mainly immigrants that were established already, the waves of Ukrainians that were already here. But also, in a lot of cases, they didn't really have the same sort of mindset. The immigrants that were here already from the early 20th century to up to World War II, they were under the pressure to really assimilate. And the Ukrainians coming after World War II were coming here under duress. They were fleeing the Nazis or the Soviets, and so they really didn't have much of a choice. And they were always very much committed to an independent Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed out that difference. That is
Mhm.
quite unique. Now, can you speak to the role that the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum has played in maintaining and celebrating Ukrainian culture within Michigan and the U.S.?
Well, for instance, we have a photographic collection of an individual called Mary Virginia Beck. And she was someone that was born in Ford City, Pennsylvania, to Ukrainian immigrant parents. Her parents, although, sent her and her two brothers to attend high school in Ukraine. And this was the period between the two world wars. So once Mary finished school in Ukraine, she returned to Pennsylvania and she completed her studies and became a lawyer. Eventually, she moved to Detroit in 1934. And here she worked at someplace called the Detroit International Institute. And in 1949, interestingly enough, she became the first woman to run and win a seat on the Detroit City Council.
Oh, nice.
And in the 1950s, she was actually the acting mayor while Detroit's Mayor Cobo was ill. So Miss Beck served on the council for 20 years. And although well known and respected in Michigan politics, she also served her local, national, and international Ukrainian community really tirelessly. She worked with the Ukrainian National Women's League of America, and she was the editor of one of the first Ukrainian American women's magazines. It was called A Woman's World in the 1930s. So we maintain her archives. We actually were very fortunate to receive, after her passing, her complete collection of photographs, her political photographs. The time she ran, she campaigned in Detroit for mayor. She actually did campaign to be the mayor of Detroit in the late 60s. So we have some of her familial photographs. She was also charged in the 30s to organize a Ukrainian pavilion in the World's Fair. So she's quite an interesting personage, and we have her collection. The Ukrainian American Archives and Museum has organized many significant exhibits on site when we had a smaller museum footprint. And at that time, we did a lot at schools and libraries throughout the region. These exhibits featured many aspects of Ukrainian folk art, textiles, and traditions. In 2013, there was a significant exhibit that was held at the Detroit Historical Museum. They have a community room, which they allow various groups within the city to use to mount exhibits for like a 3-month period. So we curated and mounted an exhibit called A Cultural Thread, The Enduring Ukrainian Spirit. And this highlighted the history and accomplishments of the Ukrainian American community in Michigan. So we featured a lot of photographs from all through the history of the immigration in the 20th century. And it was very successful exhibit. So we organized also many and hosted many lectures, workshops, and musical events around the themes of Ukraine and Ukrainian American history, both in the traditions and the works of Ukrainian composers and artists. In 2019, we created a series called a Wellspring series. And we do this primarily in our small gallery. It highlights the works of local Ukrainian American artists and craftsmen, both living and deceased. And we were asked to organize an exhibit featuring enduring Ukrainian artists for the Scarab Club, which is located right behind the Detroit Institute of Arts in Detroit. And that was in 2023. What we noted was, as the war was going on in Ukraine, more and more people were interested in learning more about the culture of Ukraine. So many of these artists were not well known to the public in the United States, and we worked with a local collector to provide a good example of the various artists. And this past December, we featured Ukrainian Christmas traditions and culture at the Frederick Meyer Gardens and Sculpture Park in the western Michigan city of Grand Rapids. And that was quite an honor for us. We were invited also by the University of Michigan's Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia to curate and mount an exhibit called Threads of Tradition, the Art of the Ukrainian Embroidery, or Vyshyvanka. So we're getting noticed more and more. It's kind of hard to keep up sometimes with the requests, but we're happy to do it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I noticed on your Facebook page and on your website pictures of some of your events, and it looks like you guys have a great time.
Yeah, we do.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you assumed your role at the organization at UAAM in April of 2018. How did your experiences shape your journey to your current role in the organization, and what motivated you along the way?
Well, quite honestly, my parents came after the Second World War. They met in a displaced persons camp in Germany. They got married there. My older sister was born in Germany, and then when she was 7 months old, my parents finally got permission to come to the United States and got on a ship from Bremen and arrived in New York City. But my parents' lives were an example of their dedication to growing the Ukrainian community and its culture while always sharing this with the outside community. So my late father, whose name was Mikola, was a musician, and he was a survivor of many of the worst historical events in Ukraine in the 20th century. So at the beginning of World War II, he was completely alone. He was an orphan. He was a young man, and he joined the Ukrainian Banduras chorus in Kiev. Now, for those of you who may not know, the musical instrument, the bandura, is a uniquely Ukrainian instrument with a deep history in Ukraine. So my father joining this group sort of shared their plight. They were actually forcibly taken by the Nazis into camps in Germany. The only saving grace were that, they were together. And ultimately they were released from concentration camp, but they were forced by the Nazis to go to the various labor camps where Ukrainians were to entertain them. And so that was both joyful and very tragic at the same time. And my mother, Olana, was a teacher, a community activist in Ukrainian American civic organizations, women's organizations, and cultural life. She was also very involved in our lives in, quote unquote, the American school system, and was a Detroit public school teacher and later a lecturer at Wayne State University's College of Lifelong Learning, which helped transition American veterans going back into a university setting. From her, we understood the need to understand one's roots, believing that in doing this, you would be a good citizen of the U.S. When Ukraine became independent in 1991, she would frequently travel to Ukraine to take part in gatherings of representatives of Ukrainians worldwide. She was also invited to give talks in Ukraine about the U.S. and the life of Ukrainians in the United States. Now, my grandfather, my mother's father, his name was Petro, or Peter, and during the Soviet era, he was arrested and exiled to Siberia for his involvement in the late 1917s movement for Ukrainian independence. And when he arrived in the U.S., he joined an organization of those who were repressed by the Soviet government and worked on both the editorial and publishing committees to document eyewitness accounts in the history of the Ukrainian famine, which was organized and instigated by Stalin in 1932 and 1933, expressly in Ukraine. And that was the way for them to try to coerce the Ukrainian peasantry into joining the collective farm system. And so learning about Ukraine's history and how my family members lived through it while others perished at the hands of various forces has always made me aware and sensitive to the plight of Ukraine and the threats to her culture and existence. So I was educated in the American system of, public schools, but on Saturdays, I also went to a Ukrainian language school. And later on, I became certified as a teacher in that system. And I worked in the Ukrainian language school system on Saturdays, along with working at other jobs. Quite honestly, I've always sympathized with the underdogs of world history, and telling the unknown stories, the joys and sufferings of peoples is something that seems to be something that's a very motivating factor in my life.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad. The work you do is just so valuable to learn and keep track of and make it a part of our American fabric. Now, can you highlight any exciting upcoming programs, activities, or exhibitions that you believe will capture the community's interest?
Well, actually, we're very excited. Over the Christmas last 2 weeks of actually December, we were contacted by some of the newer refugees or immigrants from Ukraine. And one of the young women was asking if they could use our site as a photo studio because she had a growing collection of Ukrainian ethnographic folk costumes. And she wanted to feature them by using local models and creating a calendar for 2025. And so she also afterwards, this was like a 3-day endeavor, she asked us if we wouldn't mind helping them host a presentation of this new calendar. And they're calling this project Code of a Nation. And so we're going to be having that on February 1st at 5 o'clock here at the museum. And the dress code is they're asking people to wear their Ukrainian embroideries to celebrate Ukrainian culture. So we're really excited about that because it is engaging a group of individuals that might not be aware of the fact that there is a Ukrainian museum within their community.
Yeah, fantastic.
And also this spring, before Easter, we're going to be hosting a number of workshops featuring how to make Ukrainian pisanki, which is the art of Ukrainian Easter egg.
Oh, cool.
So that's really, really very engaging for both youngsters and their parents. And later in the year, we'll be organizing something called Treasures from Our Homes. And it's similar to like a Memories Roadshow. And we're asking people to bring their Ukrainian and Ukrainian American artifacts or treasures from their homes for analysis and documentation. It might be something that they inherited from their grandparents or great-grandparents and don't really know what it is. They don't read Ukrainian anymore. And we're going to have specialists here to help identify the item. And also we're going to be offering some genealogy services that evening. And also there's going to be a textile expert to talk about how to properly preserve and store these artifacts if you have a private collection.
Oh, very cool. Now, the pisane eggs, are they made out of metal or
No, they're actually raw chicken eggs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like a reverse batik method where you start with the raw white egg and then you identify the pattern you want, and everything that you want to remain white, you cover with hot wax that you apply to the egg with something called a stylus.
Wow.
So it's melted beeswax. And once you're done with that initial design, you dip it in the first lightest egg dye, which is an aniline dye. It's not a food coloring. And then that dye will cover whatever's white on the egg that's remained exposed. And so when you dry the egg, then you decide what you want as your yellow in the design. So you build up the design until you have the darkest background you want, and the egg is basically covered in wax. And then you remove the wax and your design is revealed.
Okay. And you empty the contents of the egg prior to beginning this?
No, you do it afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise it's very difficult to control the egg in the dye.
Right.
Because it's lighter than the water.
Okay.
So it's better to keep the contents intact. And then once you're done, usually the next day you will blow out the contents.
Wow, very cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Olga, I think we should take a break for a few minutes.
Perfect timing. It's a good time for a break.
Listeners, we'll be right back after these important messages regarding the value of becoming a member of the Ukrainian American Archive and Museum. You'll learn about the excellent membership benefits.
Nestled in the heart of Hamtramck, Michigan, there's a place where stories of courage, resilience, and vibrant culture come alive. The Ukrainian American Archives and Museum is more than just a museum. It's a celebration of Ukrainian heritage and a beacon for future generations. Have you ever wondered what it's like to trace the footsteps of immigrants who brought their traditions, art, and dreams to the shores of America? or how generations have contributed to the fabric of our great nation. At UAAM, you can uncover treasures like folk art, historical documents, a splendid research library, and fine art that tell the story of Ukrainian immigration to Michigan and beyond. But preserving this rich history and sharing it with the world takes a community. And that's where you come in. By becoming a member of the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum, you're not just joining an organization, you're becoming part of a legacy.
When I became a member, I found a home. I have connected with people who share my passion for history and culture. Together, we are keeping these stories alive for future generations.
Whether you're Ukrainian by heritage or simply curious about the culture, UAAM welcomes you with open arms. As a member, you'll enjoy free admission to the museum, advance notification of upcoming special events and exhibit openings, library and archival access, a private shopping day at the Christmas market, invitations to member-only events, eligibility to vote at the annual meeting, and the joy of knowing you're helping preserve priceless artifacts for years to come. Membership starts at just $30 a year. That's less than $1 a week to help keep the flame of Ukrainian culture burning brightly in Hamtramck and beyond.
Ready to make a difference? Visit us today at 9630 Joseph Campau in Hamtramck, or learn more online at ukrainianmuseumdetroit.org. Follow us on Facebook at UAAM Detroit, or call us at 313-366-9764. For questions, email us at uaamdetroit@gmail.com. Together, let's honor the past, inspire the future, and celebrate the vibrant Ukrainian culture that enriches us all.
Join the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum today.
Turn up the dial, Preservation Oaks blasting, diving into stories never ever lasting. From Maine to Montana, conversation ranges. Every episode, history exchanges. Got the mic hot, host keep it vibing, with guests coast to coast, always keeping it alive. And listen to the tales of America unfold. Preservation Oaks, every story pure gold. Preservation Oaks, where the past meets the present. Every swing of history, delightful and pleasant. Tune in, every episode's a trip. From cities to the countryside, get a grip. Ears to the sneakers, soak in the knowledge. From pioneers to poets and the scholars polished, laying down the legacy brick by brick. Preservation Oaks, such a smooth mix. Hitting deep topics with that American swag. From the mountains to the prairies, we wave the flag. Conversations rich like an old oak tree. Preservation Oaks, always setting minds free. Take a ride through time, no DeLorean needed. Voices from the past, curiosity heated. From Civil War tales to modern day dreams, Preservation Oaks always reigns supreme. Preservation, preservation, preservation. Got the mic hot, hosts keep it vibing, with guests coast to coast, always keeping it alive. And listen to the tales of America unfold. Preservation Oaks, every story pure gold. Preservation Oaks, where the past meets the present. Every swing of history, delightful and pleasant. Tune in, every episode's a trip. From cities to the countryside, get a grip. Ears to the speakers, soak in the knowledge. From pioneers to poets and the scholars polished, laying down the legacy brick by brick. Preservation Oaks, such a smooth mix. Hitting deep topics with that American swag. From the mountains to the prairies, we wave the flag. Conversations rich like an old oak tree. Preservation Oaks, always setting minds free. Take a ride through time, no DeLorean needed. Voices from the past, curiosity heated. From Civil War tales to modern day dreams, Preservation Oaks always reigns supreme. Preservation, preservation.
Hello again, and welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, and today we're honored to be joined by Olga Liskiwskyi, the Executive Director of the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum. This incredible institution, located in Hamtramck, Michigan, serves as a vibrant hub for preserving and celebrating Ukrainian history and culture. Welcome back, Olga.
Oh, good to be back. Let's continue from where we left off.
Olga, with the ongoing war in Ukraine, how has the UAAM adapted its work to address this crisis? Are there specific programs or initiatives to support Ukraine or assist refugees?
Yes, it's been a really interesting time. Initially, we worked with the Folk Arts Society of America, who were interested in finding ways to collaborate with Ukrainian cultural institutions in Ukraine to safeguard their digital collections, both museums and cultural researchers in Ukraine. And that was something that we were able to help them with. We liaised with some individual organizations that were helpful in creating iCloud storage for these museums in Ukraine. And we were also engaged with something called Save Our Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, which was an attempt initially to gather volunteers worldwide and asking them to do screen grabs of various Ukrainian websites in Ukraine pertaining to culture, because the anticipation was that their computer servers would be destroyed during the bombings, and many of them were. So it was a way of beginning to do that. And now they've graduated into collecting donations of money to send over digital equipment to Ukraine to help the Ukrainian museums and libraries do a quick digitization of the most important things in their collections. And so I also sent an appeal, because we're members of the American Association of Museums, and I sent an appeal over a forum, and we asked many of the members to explore ways they could professionally help our colleagues in Ukraine. And we received quite an amazing number of our colleagues' responses at that time.
Oh, fantastic.
And over the past 2+ years, our series called Eyewitness in Ukraine has spotlighted speakers who have done humanitarian work in Ukraine, as well as featuring Ukrainian medical professionals doing work in Ukraine. So they provided firsthand accounts of the situation in Ukraine and the needs. And then during the 2023 Ukrainian Heritage Consortium of North America, we were the hosts of the conference, and we welcomed 2 Ukrainian museum professionals. These young professionals have chosen to remain in Ukraine, and they're part of a group they created called Wounded Culture Project. And their task is to document the destruction of Ukrainian cultural institutions, museums, libraries, etc., that are targeted by the Russian forces. They are also collecting eyewitness accounts from Ukrainian museum directors and workers, and inventorying the cultural artifacts that have been stolen by the Russian invading army. Quite generally, we act as a touch point locally for those looking for ways to either get an update or ways to tangibly help Ukrainian refugees or the civilians or armed forces in Ukraine. So we provide just information when people call or send us emails.
Okay, glad you're there. Olga, the UAAM's mission highlights its role as a research and educational center. Could you elaborate on how the museum fulfills this mission through its library programs like tours, events, lectures, and workshops?
Well, I have to mention that over the last couple of years, we've seen a growing interest in individuals wanting to learn more about Ukrainian history and culture. And in fact, the Osher Lifelong Learning Foundation reached out to us, as do local libraries from different communities, asking us to do presentations with an overview of Ukrainian history and culture. And we, of course, are available for tours and have worked with the U.S. State Department, who are hosting visiting Ukrainian museum people or dignitaries. We've worked with the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine. We've done tours for immigration law firms, schools, and community groups. And we try to offer memorable experiences based on what the needs of the specific tour group is. We also do workshops. As I mentioned, we feature the art of the pisanka We've done a painting class called Petrikivka Art Technique, which is a unique painting technique that's prevalent in southeast Ukraine. And there's like a resurgence of interest in learning more about that technique. We've also created age-appropriate scavenger hunts for school groups. And these often provide us a point to start our discussions with the pupils that are learning Ukrainian and learning more about Ukrainian culture. Part of our educational program, we've offered our space for the Detroit School of Bandura, which hosts musical lessons every Saturday. And interested individuals are learning how to play the bandura. And they finish their year with a recital here at the museum. We've also been very fortunate this past summer to be part of the Bloomberg Arts Internship Program. And we have been committed to offering museum and archive specific training to local Detroit area high school students through this program. These are kids that are not of Ukrainian background. And so in the summer, we had 3 high school interns. And now we have one fantastic intern who's in her senior year, and she is here for her academic year. We also provide training for our volunteers and welcome them, and they're learning more and more about archival and museum practices.
Oh, fantastic. Hey, Olga mentioned the Ukrainian egg art several times now. It's called Pysanky. If you'd like to search for it on the internet, that's spelled Pysanky. I've also seen it as Pysanka or Pysankar. Not sure which is absolutely correct, but you can just search for Ukrainian eggs and that should pop up for you. They're very beautiful and a great craft art. Back to the program. Now, a bandura, I guess.
Bandura, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What is that exactly?
Well, it's an instrument that initially was used by Ukrainian wandering musicians like minstrels. It was a lightweight instrument. It has a long neck, kind of a bulbous body. It sounds almost like a lute or a harp, but it's got more strings. It's got up to 65 strings.
Like a guitar?
It's bigger than a guitar. It's not a guitar. You have to you sit and you play it. You hold it on your lap upright, and your left hand goes onto the neck, and that's where the bass part is. The melody line is played with your right hand.
Oh, okay.
So it's uniquely Ukrainian. There's nothing like it in the rest, in other cultures.
I'm going to go search for that, see if I can find some music so I can listen to it.
Yeah, you can find a lot of music. There's a great resurgence of interest in the instrument. Initially, like I said, it was a solo instrument that was played by a man. He would travel. He'd be a blind man traveling through the lands of Ukraine, and he would be accompanied by an orphan child as his lead, as his guide. And later on, at the beginning of the 20th century, you saw more and more musicians forming groups to play the bandura. And they play the bandura as an instrument, but they also use it to accompany themselves when they sing ballads or folk melodies.
Oh, very cool. What exhibitions are currently open to the public, and what themes or stories do they explore?
So right now we have something called like a remembrance exhibit dealing with the war in Ukraine. And we also have some photographs called Michigan Stands with Ukraine, and we feature local initiatives to support Ukrainian civilians and soldiers on a humanitarian level. And when people come, we keep a map of Ukraine on the wall, and it triggers a lot of questions and interest. On one of the walls, we mounted a camouflage netting, and on top of this, we have multiple photographs showing the devastation to people and culture taking place in Ukraine. And we also prepared strips of canvas and pens, which our visitors can use to write a message of support to Ukrainians. We then tie these strips to the netting. Additionally, the future displays will feature local Ukrainian artists. There was an artist called Edward Kozak and another one called Michael Dmitrenko. And we're also going to be highlighting the life and work of Mary Beck, which I mentioned earlier. And we'll add a little bit more in-depth information about this group of people that were prominent in our community. So we're also looking for ways to highlight the contributions of Ukrainian artists and their role in preserving the history and culture of Ukraine.
Could you share some of the most treasured items in the museum's collection and their significance?
So in 2019, we were gifted an extensive collection of Ukrainian textiles, ceramics, wooden carved pieces, and other items from a local family. And that family had been collecting Ukrainian material culture throughout their lives in the US. Part of their significant collection was donated to the Ukrainian Archives Museum in Cleveland, Ohio. But we were fortunate to receive the balance of the collection after Mrs. Anna Hnatyuk, the widow of the founders of this collection, passed away. So a collector sought to gather textiles, Ukrainian embroidered chemises and long shirts from all significant regions of Ukraine. So there's quite a collection, and it's quite a coup. We also have a growing collection of paintings. Significantly, there's an artist called Alexander Grichenko, who immigrated from Ukraine in the early 1920s. And we've been donated recently, as of last year, the historical currency and coin collection of Ukraine, which documents the history of Ukrainian banknotes and currency dating back to the 18th century. Mm-hmm.
That's a really nice collection. How is your organization handling the digitization of records and photographs to ensure they remain accessible in the future?
So we've been very aware of the need to do this, and we've worked to convert photo slides to a JPEG format. We've scanned significant collections of historical photos from families who trace their roots in the US to the 1920s. We have a collection from a local woman who was the director of a Ukrainian dance group. So we have many of the photographs of the dance group and their performances. So that's been kind of our priority. And we've been blessed to have interns that have been able to do that work. So it's always, keeping that initiative going. It's very important to do that in collections. We've also worked with visiting researchers and volunteers who've helped us scan collections of original drawings and sketches from our local artist, Edward Kozak. And he had an important career and impact in the artist scene, both in Ukraine and in Detroit. And also, we've been the site of a archival project that's being paid for by the Ukrainian Banduras Chorus. And they have archives spanning back to the 1920s. So their collection is not kept here at the museum. They keep it off-site, but they bring in their folders and they pay students to do the actual digitization and cataloging, inventorying of the collection. So that's been going on for several years now, and we're very happy to accommodate them by offering our space. So we have a lot of work, always.
Yeah. So what tool do you use to oversee and catalog your collection?
Well, right now we're using Excel to create databases, but they're going to be migrated to our existing Past Perfect management system. So we're using Past Perfect at this point, both to manage our membership database and also for archives, books, photos, and artifacts. And we're actually going to be going to a web-based version of Past Perfect. We're in the middle of doing that.
Yeah, very cool. Boy, big jobs. Holy cow.
Mhm.
It's gonna take
I got to
a few
tell you, I
years.
could tell you a funny story. I had a woman come here and she wanted to buy a painting from one of our, exhibits. We were selling the paintings, and after we were done with the transaction, she goes, "Well, like, what do you do normally here? Like, do you bring work to do from home?" And I looked at her like, "What work to do from home?" She goes, "Well, I don't know. Maybe you bring your knitting or." Like, Zena, I don't have time to look up in the heavens, let alone bring my knitting.
Yeah, exactly.
I said, so actually, when your women's group is going to come in for a tour, I'm going to give you a background of what we do behind the scenes.
Part of why I do this podcast, because people just don't know
They don't realize,
the amount of work that's involved in
Mhm.
maintaining and preserving these artifacts is incredible.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
When I worked for the Henry Ford Museum, one of the initial projects I was hired to do was we had to update the inventory of the entire collection because they were in jeopardy of losing their accreditation, because when Henry Ford built the place, he really didn't care about storage space for artifacts. So we had to go through everything and update the systems. And then at that point, the curators were going through and deaccessioning, multiple copies of the same thing. So yeah, it's very important to understand the need to do that registrarial work and also to maintain a good storage area to extend the life of this artifact or archive. So it's extremely important.
Yeah, and you work so hard at it. I'm just thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you.
With everything going on, how do you fund your organization? What's your funding model?
Well, we're working on that. The board of directors has invited about 30 individuals from the community to serve on various advisory committees, and we're looking to grow our fundraising efforts. But at this point, it's just general donations from public and membership. We also do quite a successful annual Christmas appeal. We host an annual Christmas market where we feature local and Ukrainian artisans and vendors. We do get donations from foundations. We do appeal for grants. And also we've benefited from this internship program through the Bloomberg Arts Internship.
Oh, very good. What are some of the ways people can contribute through fundraising activities to help support your organization's goals?
So, of course, membership is always important, but it doesn't pay the bills for the majority of our expenses. So we offer giving opportunities through our website. We also have online shopping for merchandise, gifts, items, and vintage offerings on our website. And we're also going to be posting a wish list onto our website. We also look for exhibit sponsors. So when we're mounting an exhibit, last year we mounted something called Ink is Identity. And we were actually exploring the phenomenon of Ukrainian tattoos, both in Ukraine and in the immigration. Tattooing is not something that is Ukrainian art form necessarily, but it's been triggered because of the war in Ukraine. And so it was a very interesting exhibit idea and an exploration. And we were able to engage a different audience and also find some sponsors who were eager to do something different.
Oh, fantastic. Great. So what role does membership play in your organization's work, and what types of membership options are offered?
So membership is significant in terms of our programming and exhibit strategies. And we are actually doing some surveys and engaging, as I said, an advisory committee to make sure that we are answering the needs of the community, not just thinking, oh, we know what people want kind of thing. The levels of membership include a supporting role, an annual supporting role in the amount of $125. You can get a family membership for $75. Individuals are at $40. And then we have the seniors, artists, and students who we're asking to contribute at $30 a year. We also accept donations in honor or in remembrance of individuals or families. And then the cumulative donations are updated and listed on our donor wall, which is featured prominently as you walk into the museum.
Are you selling any kind of certificates or anything like that?
Not at this point, but we'll see what the advisory committee suggests.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When is their work supposed to be done?
Actually, this Saturday, we're doing a meet and greet with them, and I'm going to be doing an overview of the work we've been doing, and we're trying to engage them per their interest. So, do you want to help us out with fundraising? Do you want to help us out with collections management, with the being stewards of the collection? What marketing, that kind of thing. So we're going to be seeing how things shake out this Saturday.
2025 is going to be a great year for you guys.
I hope so.
Wow, that's great. Now, you mentioned the Christmas market. What other signature events, especially around holidays, does your organization host, and what's the significance to the community?
Well, 2 years ago, we started this expo, which was a celebration of Ukrainian Easter traditions and the Ukrainian Pisanka writing. So we're going to get back to that this year. We're going to have at least 3 workshops and try to make that a significant event every year.
Yeah, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to interrupt our wonderful conversation, but I think we should take a quick break.
Well, I guess it's a good time for us to branch out and take a break.
Listeners, we'll be right back after these important messages about donating to and supporting the Ukrainian American Archive and Museum.
In the heart of Hamtramck, Michigan, there's a treasure, a sanctuary of history and heritage. The Ukrainian American Archives and Museum preserves the stories of generations who overcame unimaginable struggles to find hope and opportunity in America. But these stories need your help to live on. For decades, the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum has worked tirelessly to preserve history through its extensive archives, folk art collection, research library, and inspiring exhibits. This museum is a beacon of culture, identity, and pride for Ukrainian Americans and everyone who believes in the power of heritage. But preserving the past and sharing it with future generations isn't easy. It requires dedication, resources, and people like you. With your donation, you're ensuring these invaluable artifacts and stories remain accessible to everyone. Today, tomorrow, and beyond. Your gift helps to preserve and restore priceless artifacts that tell the story of Ukrainian immigration and culture. Fund educational programs, events, and exhibits that bring history to life. Support workshops and lectures that connect communities and spark understanding. And ensure future generations can learn from and celebrate this rich cultural heritage. Together, we can honor the sacrifices of those who came before us and build a brighter future. No matter the size, your donation makes an impact. Imagine the difference your gift could make today.
Donating is simple. Visit us online at ukrainianmuseumdetroit.org and click on the Support and then Donate tabs. Follow us on Facebook at UAM Detroit or call us at 313-366-9764. You can also send a check to 9630 Joseph Campau in Hamtramck, Michigan, 48212. Every contribution matters. Every dollar helps preserve a piece of history.
With your donations, we can ensure that the voices of the past are never silenced. Join in honoring the spirit of resilience and the beauty of culture. Make your donation to the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum today.
This is James Burns, neurodiverse freelance curator, and I listen to Sean Thomas Radcliff and Preservation Oaks on MicroStream Radio.
This is Carrie Eilers from the Cedar Falls Historical Society, and I love listening to Preservation Oaks on MicroStream Radio.
This is Linda Whiting, the director of the Fraser Farmstead Museum. I had a lot of fun as a guest on Preservation Oaks.
And now, here's a little nugget for you. Every artifact holds a memory. Every artifact in a historical society or museum holds a memory waiting to be discovered. Come visit and learn about these treasures, or volunteer to help share these timeless stories with others.
And now, here's a little nugget for you. Unraveling stories one era at a time. Think of history as a giant ball of yarn. Messy, tangled, and occasionally chewed by a cat. Join us at the Historical Society or Museum and help unravel these stories before they get lost in the attic.
This is a reading of The Dash Poem by Linda Ellis. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on Earth. And now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So, think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a little while. So, when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash?
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Radcliff, and we're here today with Executive Director of the Ukrainian American Archive and Museum, Ms. Olga Liskiwskyi. I'm learning a lot, Olga. Thank you, and welcome back.
Good to be back. We were just getting into the good stuff. Let's pick up where we left off and uncover more secrets and information about the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum.
Olga, how can community members participate as volunteers? What types of roles or projects are open to them?
So we've enjoyed a growing number of young volunteers that have come forward and wanting to do work in the museum. And also we're benefiting from a very involved board of directors who are very much hands-on. We also have women's organizations, Ukrainian National Women's League of America, and they present various programs and use our site to do that. And like I mentioned earlier, we're very excited to begin working with a group of some 30 volunteers who are going to be part of a newly created advisory committee. And we're hoping that their insights and experience and talents will help lighten our load, and we'll be able to continue to grow our efforts.
Fantastic. How does your organization connect and collaborate with similar institutions at the local, state, or national level to further shared goals?
So locally, we've worked with museums such as the Hamtramck Historical Museum, the Hamtramck Arts Commission, the Hellenic Museum, which is the Greek immigration story in Detroit, the Scarab Club in downtown Detroit. We also had an opportunity to work with the Arab American Museum in Dearborn, as they are considered an ethnically based museum with collections that reflect the life of Arab Americans. And we've been able to share experiences and exchange ideas and also share in our challenges. We've also been receptive to collaborations with universities at U of M, University of Michigan, both in Dearborn and Ann Arbor. And we recently worked with the Frederick Meyer Gardens to provide educational programming at their request. And nationally, we're members of the Ukrainian Heritage Consortium of North America. And so since 2011, this group of Ukrainian American and Canadian museums, libraries, and research facilities have hosted annual conferences. And within North America, we number about 15 institutions. So that includes the Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Ukrainian Canadian Research and Documentation Center in Toronto, the Ukrainian Museum in New York City, Ukrainian Museum Archives in Cleveland, Ukrainian National Museum in Chicago, and the Prairie Center for the Study of Ukrainian Heritage at the University of Saskatchewan. So you see, Ukrainians love their museums.
Yeah.
and understand the importance of not only having a national presence, but a local presence as well, to be able to provide a service to local communities.
And you guys are so interconnected. I'm really intrigued by that. I think it's great.
hmm
Now, are you capturing oral histories as part of your work? And what role do these stories play in preserving local heritage?
So, some years ago, we identified several local Ukrainian Americans and wanted to capture their oral histories on tape, which we did. But unfortunately, we only did about 5 to 6 individual histories. And we're hoping to jumpstart this program in preparation for the U.S. semi-quincentennial, I said that correctly,
Yeah.
or the 250th anniversary of the founding of the U.S. So, in their programming ideas handbook, the American Association for State and Local History has offered a section on communities doing history. And it underscores the importance of gathering oral history in one's own community. So, with that in mind, we've met with both the Hamtramck Historical Museum and a representative of the Bengali emigre community in the area to discuss strategies and share ideas. So, right now in Hamtramck, I say the biggest ethnic communities are the Bengali and the Yemeni, but there's also a growing Ukrainian refugee presence. So we are trying to work with other ethnic groups, because we all sort of face the same challenges and we could all benefit from working together.
Are there any notable books or guides or articles your organization has published, and what topics do they cover?
So we published a series of exhibit catalogs from the Wellspring series featuring Ukrainian American artists such as Roman Baranik, John Negrich, Yarema Kozak, the Sanyuk brothers, as well as a catalog dealing with Ukrainian mythology, legends, and folklore. This was an exhibit we did in 2023. We also have copies of the 2013 A Cultural Thread, The Enduring Ukrainian Spirit, which features the life of the Ukrainian American immigration experience in Michigan. And we also have published an overview of the Ukrainian Pisimka tradition with drawings, photos, and explanations of designs, techniques, and symbols.
Cool. And where can they get those books?
We're actually going to be uploading some of the catalog offerings onto our website. Within the last 6 months, we've redone our website, and we have somebody now that's volunteered to do our updates. So we're going to be uploading some vintage items like long playing records that'll be available, and also some of our catalogs.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For people interested in exploring more about Ukrainian heritage or culture, can you recommend any essential readings or resources?
So we're actually working on uploading our processed collections, our archives, and our website also features our collaborations with local universities. But as far as resources, I would say that you can go on something like Ukrainian History and Educational Center, which is located in New Jersey, and they actually have quite a lot of information there. They're kind of ahead of us in terms of uploading their process collections, and you'll see a lot of history of Ukrainians in America on their website. They also are doing a number of genealogy consulting and providing resources as well.
I'd like to give the contact information for the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum one more time. You can find them at their website at www.ukrainianmuseumdetroit.org. They're on Facebook at UAAM Detroit. Their email is uaamdetroit@gmail.com. You can phone them at 313-366-9764, and you can visit them at 9630 Joseph Campau, Hamtramck, Michigan, 48212. And you can visit them on Wednesday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sunday to Tuesday, they're closed. Now, what kinds of information and resources can visitors find on your organization's website?
Well, we do offer, past exhibits, usually photographs of our past exhibits. We offer connections into our collaborations with universities and local museums and the local community. Then also we're rolling out on our online gift store, which actually does feature some items at this point, and as well as our history, a little bit about ourselves and things like that.
Okay. What approaches are you taking to inspire young individuals? You mentioned interns, but what other approaches do you have to inspire young individuals to participate in your volunteer efforts and contribute their skills?
So we're working to engage at every opportunity. So at events, open houses, community programs, we regularly try to engage individuals. We also regularly post the work of our volunteers on Facebook, and we're finding that gives an exposure and an interest. I mean, from the fact that somebody's grandmother will be liking it to to community members understanding that, we do have a brigade of, volunteers that are doing the behind the scenes. What was interesting a couple years back, I had a young woman from Ukraine. I didn't realize at the time she was a refugee from the war. And she came and was exploring some of our books. And she asked me quite sheepishly, "Do you ever accept volunteers?" And I said, "Of course we do." And she goes, "Ever since I've arrived in this country, I'm trying to learn the language. I've been engaged in trying to find work and working. And I just feel like that's all I do is work and work and work. And I have nothing to feed my soul."
Mm.
And so in contrast to that kind of daily drudgery, she asked if she could come in on a weekly basis on a Saturday or on her day off and work with us in behind the scenes. So that was kind of a revelation that we could provide that sort of volunteer experience to somebody.
Now, right now, you're going through this evaluation from the board, right? The committee.
Yeah.
And so you've got a lot going on in 2025. But at this time, what specific efforts or needs does your organization currently have that community members can contribute to and engage with?
I think, quite honestly, just helping us with our fundraising efforts. We try to be very careful with what we have in our budget, but, we have to maintain our building. We have to maintain our collection, our standards. We have to create exhibits. A couple years back when I first started this job, I availed myself of some workshops that were run by the Michigan Historical Society, and there was a class offered. It was like exhibits on a dime. And that's basically, what you have to learn to do. But it would be great if we had some financial stability. We are looking to engage with other institutions. I mentioned the Inca's Identity Show. Number of institutions are asking if they could borrow the exhibit, and they're on the East Coast of the United States. So that would be a first for us. We would actually be having a traveling exhibit. So that's something that we would want to grow in the future.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you guys do any genealogical consulting and research for the public through your organization?
This is my great love. If I could, that's all I would be doing. But since I've been working at the Ukrainian American Archives and Museum, we've been able to help offer some basic help because of my knowledge of Ukrainian and things like that. So if people come with a birth certificate from their great-grandfather, I can explain to them and welcome them to the Ukrainian tribe because, yes, you are a Ukrainian, even though your great-grandfather's birth certificate said that he was Austro-Hungarian. He was just born in the Empire of Austro-Hungary, but ethnically he was Ukrainian. So we've been able to do, quick kind of assessments of people's collections or questions. And then this past year, we've actually enjoyed the expertise of a new board member. His name is Alex Tolsdorf, and he's a genealogist and speaker. And he's been working with us to explore ways we can offer consulting and resource opportunities. He does himself research, and his expertise is in Eastern Europe, German, and Dutch communities. But then again, last fall, we were visited by Michelle Chubenko from New Jersey, and she's a professional genealogist and a research team lead with Legacy Tree Genealogists. And she specializes in Central and Eastern European research. The reason she stopped by was, other than giving a talk locally for a Polish genealogy group, she was actually looking into our archives to understand what we might be able to offer her as she goes about, future research projects. And then, as I mentioned, there's a Ukrainian History and Education Center located near Princeton, New Jersey. And we recommend that interested individuals look them up. They have a Facebook group called the Nashi Predki, which means Our Ancestors in Ukrainian, and it's a family history group. And this group offers you can set up an appointment, a virtual appointment with a genealogist to get you going on a project. They also offer in-person talks and conferences. And they also link us to the Jewish community, which has a very big history on the lands of Ukraine. So there's Laura Diamond, and she's a member of the team, and she's been researching her Ashkenazi Jewish family history for the last 25 years. And she's become quite an expert in the Russian Empire era and the Austro-Hungarian Empire records. So she's quite a resource, and she's kind of joined our initiative as well nationally.
Yeah, as a researcher myself, it can be very confusing getting into the Slavic countries. You
Yes.
really have to
Mhm.
understand all that history and all of those various regions.
Mhm.
Alex does a wonderful job. We featured Alex on
Yeah.
episode 67 for the Ford Genealogy Club. And he's just a great individual.
Yeah, he was the one that actually pushed me to do this.
I'm so glad because I have learned so much. And I know that people listening are going to learn a lot too. Now, as a history enthusiast, what do you think the world will look like 100 years from now?
That's a very difficult question. Personally, I think we face many existential challenges in the near future and 100 years from now, but we don't seem to support long-range thinkers, and I hope that future generations will make the needed sacrifices that we ourselves are not willing to make, such as reduction of carbon emissions and that sort of thing. As far as the shape of the world, I need to adapt some of the relentless optimism I'm witnessing in Ukraine. Whenever I get depressed about what's happening, I'll go on to live streaming news from Ukraine. And quite honestly, I'm buoyed by their optimism and how much they're fighting for their rights to exist as a people and country. As far as whether we'll exist as an institution, I can't say, but I'm thinking that the various North American Ukrainian museums and cultural institutions may have to search for a way to consolidate our resources and our work. For instance, in Canada, the Ukrainian museums are centrally controlled and they have 6 branches. So they have basically one institution, but they have 6 branches throughout the country. And that might be the way we need to go in the future.
Okay, very cool. Thank you for your input. I appreciate it. Olga, I want to thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation today. It's been a pleasure learning about the Ukrainian American culture and the work that the UAAM does in the community. I've learned a lot and I feel truly inspired by the information. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I can't thank you enough for your professionalism and all the research that you've had to do on your end, and for the fact that you're doing these podcasts.
And with that, we'll end our time with our guest, Olga Liskiwskyi. Listeners, please stay tuned for my comments and wrap-up, which is coming up next. As we come to the end of today's episode, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the profound journey we've just taken with Olga Liskiwskyi, the executive director of the Ukrainian American Archive and Museum in Hamtramck, Michigan. She was so kind and patient to educate us all and help us understand more about the Ukrainian American story. Many thanks, Olga, and much appreciated. We learned so much about the history of Ukraine, the incredible strength and resilience of its people, and the way Ukrainian Americans have maintained a vibrant cultural identity even in the face of enormous hardship. Ukraine's history is one of constant struggle. Positioned at the crossroads of Europe, Ukraine has always been pulled in different directions by powerful empires, each leaving its mark on the land and its people. Throughout the centuries, Ukrainians have fought fiercely to protect their independence and their way of life. From battling serfdom to resisting foreign domination, their history is one of enduring strength. Then in the late 19th century, waves of Ukrainians started coming to the United States in search of freedom and opportunity. Some arrived escaping war-torn Europe, seeking a better life after being displaced in refugee camps after World War II. And now, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we're witnessing yet another wave of migration as people flee violence and destruction to rebuild their lives. These Ukrainians, both past and present, are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite centuries of adversity, they've managed to maintain their culture, their traditions, and their sense of identity. The Ukrainian American Archive and Museum is a shining example of this resilience. What started as a small reading room in 1958 to keep Ukrainian Americans connected to their culture has blossomed into a thriving institution under Olga's leadership. The museum has become a crucial part of the community, offering resources, exhibits, and programs that not only preserve Ukrainian heritage, but also actively respond to the needs of the current moment. The decision to move the museum to a larger, more visible location has truly transformed it, making it accessible to more people and enabling it to do even more to connect with the broader community. Throughout our conversation, Olga shared some incredible aspects of the museum's collection. Items like traditional Ukrainian textiles, historical coins, and even the work of influential figures like Mary Virginia Beck, Detroit's first female city council member. And then there's the museum's collaboration with museums in Ukraine, where they're working to preserve cultural artifacts, document the current war, and ensure that the stories of those living through this crisis are not forgotten. The Code of a Nation project, which involved Ukrainian refugees here in the U.S., is just one example of how the museum is capturing the present moment while honoring the past. But what really stood out to me was how the UAAM serves as a place of connection, a place where Ukrainian Americans can come together, share their stories, and find a sense of community. The church, St. John the Baptist's Ukrainian Catholic Church, and initiatives like Nasha Hata, which means our home, provided support and comfort to immigrants, helping them establish roots in their new country. And today, the UAAM is continuing that legacy of support with language classes, preserving family heirlooms, and hosting workshops that connect people to their heritage in meaningful ways. Olga's vision for the future of the museum is also incredibly forward-thinking. By expanding their genealogy resources and working with experts like Alex Tolksdorf, the museum is helping people trace their roots and deepen their connection to their Ukrainian heritage. And by collaborating with universities, museums, and cultural organizations across the country, they're ensuring that the museum remains an active and vital part of the broader community. As we reflect on everything Olga shared, I think it's important to recognize how much this story can teach us all. The UAAM's journey shows us that cultural heritage is not just about preserving objects. It's about the living, breathing traditions that continue to shape our identities. It's about the stories we share, the connections we make, and the ways we continue to express our culture, no matter where we are. It's also a reminder of how powerful community can be. When the Ukrainian American community came together to create the UAAM, they were driven by a need to preserve their culture and support one another. And that sense of community is still alive today, driving the museum's work and reminding us that in times of crisis, we are stronger when we come together. Whether it's through an organization like the UAAM or the small community-based groups in our own hometowns, these collective efforts make us stronger and help us navigate life's challenges. And lastly, the UAAM story invites us to think about the cultural treasures in our own communities, the small museums, historical societies, genealogical societies, and local organizations that keep our heritage alive. These places may not always be in the spotlight, but they're essential to understanding who we are and where we come from. Whether it's through preserving artifacts, telling stories, or providing a space for people to connect, these institutions play a crucial role in keeping our culture vibrant. So as you listen today, think about the ways you can engage with your own community's history and culture. Perhaps there's a museum or a historical society nearby that you haven't yet visited. Or maybe there's a local project you can get involved in to help preserve the heritage of the people around you. You don't have to be Ukrainian to appreciate the power of cultural preservation. It's something that transcends borders and connects us all. The UAAM is a beautiful example of passion, dedication, and love for one's heritage. From its humble beginnings to its current success, it's an institution that's not only preserving the past, but actively shaping the future of Ukrainian American culture. Their work reminds us of the importance of history, community, and the need to support the cultural treasures that enrich our lives. I hope this conversation has inspired you as much as it inspired me. Whether it was the resilience of the Ukrainian people, the power of community, or the beauty of learning about a new culture, there's something in this episode for everyone. And if you feel moved by the work of the UAAM, consider supporting them in any way you can, whether it's through a visit, volunteering, donating, or simply spreading the word about the incredible work they're doing. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. This has been an eye-opening and inspiring conversation, and I hope it sparks a curiosity in you to learn more about Ukraine, about Ukrainian American culture, and about the cultural treasures in your own backyard. Stay curious, stay inspired, and keep exploring. I'd like to provide listeners with the contact information for the organization one last time. You can visit their website at www.ukrainianmuseumdetroit.org. You can find them on Facebook at UAAM Detroit. You can email them at uaamdetroit@gmail.com. You can phone them at 313-366-9764. Their address is 9630 Joseph Campau, Hamtramck, Michigan, 48212. Now, if questions occur to you and you'd like more information, please connect with the organization via the contact information just provided. If you're a listener in the area the organization serves and you're not already a member, please consider joining and supporting them. I hope this information helps the audience understand how valuable the organization is to the community and what kinds of excellent services they have to offer to their members and the public. The Ukrainian American Archive and Museum is truly one of our nation's preservation oaks. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Music used today is from Cymbalbird, Ivan Luzon, S Audio, Beat Roof Studio, Heart Drum Machine, Snow Music Studio, and Scott Holmes. Microstream Radio is a registered trademark. You can visit us at www.microstreamradio.com. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted by Microstream Radio. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, reproduced, copied, or used anywhere without the written permission of Microstream Radio. Hopefully you found today's episode useful, informative, and thought-provoking. If so, please like, comment, and subscribe. Remember that being free means being free to be curious, and that historical and genealogical societies and museums allow us to discover the past, be free to explore, where curiosity opens every door. Thanks to everybody for listening. Stay cozy, curious, and keep exploring the incredible stories that shape our world. Remember to cherish and support the preservation of history in your own communities. This is Sean Radcliffe. We'll see you all next time on Preservation Oaks. And until then, keep on giving and keep on living the good life.